I almost drove past her. I want to be upfront about that because it's the truest thing about that night. The rain had been bad since about 7, but around 9 it turned into something else. Sideways, then straight down, then sideways again, hard enough that my wipers couldn't keep up even on the fastest setting. I was maybe 15 minutes from home, tired, half listening to some podcast I wasn't actually following, when my headlights caught something on the shoulder that didn't belong there. A car, pulled off at a bad angle, hazards blinking slow like the battery was already giving up. And a woman standing next to it, arms crossed tight over her chest, not waving, not doing anything to flag me down, just standing there getting soaked. My first instinct, honestly, was to keep going. It was late, the road was empty, and you hear enough stories these days that stopping for a stranger at night doesn't feel like the obvious move it used to be. I actually got about 200 feet past her before I hit the brakes and pulled onto the shoulder myself. I don't know exactly why. Something about the way she wasn't asking for help. People who want help usually wave their arms. She looked like someone who'd stopped expecting anyone to stop. I backed up slow and rolled my window down a crack. "You okay?" I called out. She looked up fast, startled, like she hadn't even heard my engine over the rain. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice came out steady. Her hands, gripping her own elbows, were not. I looked past her at the car. Hood up, something steaming off the engine. Hard to tell if it was smoke or just rain hitting hot metal. Her phone was in her hand, screen dark. "Car's not fine," I said. "And it's getting cold fast. You got someone coming to get you?" She hesitated, just a beat too long. Then she glanced back down the road behind her. Not toward me, past me, like she was checking if something was following her rather than checking for a ride. "No signal out here," she said. "Phone died a few minutes ago anyway." I sat there with the engine idling, rain hammering the roof, trying to decide what the responsible thing to do was. 20 miles either direction on this road and there's nothing. No gas station, no diner, nothing but wet fields and telephone poles. "There's nothing out here for 20 miles, I said. "I live about 10 minutes that way. You're welcome to dry off, use my phone, wait out the storm. I'm not going to pretend you should just trust some guy who stopped on the road at night. I get that. I'm just telling you what's around." She studied me for a long moment. Long enough that I actually thought she might turn and start walking into the storm instead. Whatever she was weighing, it wasn't just me against the weather. There was something else in it. "Is there a gas station anywhere close?" she finally asked. "Not for 20 miles, I said again. She looked at her dead car, then down the empty road, then back at me. "Can I sleep at your place?" she asked. The question came out careful, like it cost her something to say. "Yeah," I said. "Get in." She grabbed one bag from the passenger seat of her car. Small, packed in a hurry from the look of it, and climbed into mine. Water ran off her jacket onto my floor mat. She held the bag on her lap with both arms, the way you'd hold something you were scared someone might try to take. We drove a couple minutes in silence before I said, "I'm Grady, by the way." She didn't answer right away. "Ren," she said finally. Just the one name. No last name, no explanation for the dead car or the bag or the way she kept glancing at the side mirror every few seconds. I didn't ask. Something told me if I pushed, she'd ask me to pull over and let her out right there. The last stretch of road felt longer than 10 minutes. Lightning kept flashing the whole sky white for a second at a time, and every time it did I caught her staring out the window, jaw tight, not blinking. I didn't know yet who she was running from, or how long she'd end up staying, or what it would cost either of us before this was over. All I knew right then was that I had a stranger in my passenger seat, a storm that wasn't letting up, and a house up ahead that had been too quiet for way too long. The porch light was on when we pulled in, same as it always is, out of habit more than anything, since there's usually nobody waiting for me. Ren stood in the entryway for a second after I opened the door, dripping onto the hardwood, looking around the way you look at a place when you're trying to figure out who lives there. I saw her clock the single mug in the drying rack, the one jacket on the hook, the kind of quiet a house gets when it's held one person for too long. She didn't say anything about any of it. She just stood there, arms still wrapped around her bag. "Bathrooms down the hall on the left," I said. I'll grab you something dry. I found an old sweatshirt and a pair of sweatpants that were going to swallow her. Left them outside the bathroom door, and went to start something in the kitchen. Just soup from a can and some bread, nothing worth bragging about. Felt strange cooking for someone else. I hadn't done that in a long time. She came out a few minutes later, hair pushed back, dwarfed in my clothes, and sat down across from me at the table. We ate mostly in silence at first. Rain kept going against the windows. Then her hands started shaking. Not from cold. This was different, faster, like something was working its way up through her whole body. She set her spoon down and pushed back from the table. Sorry, she said. Give me a second. She turned toward the counter, one hand pressed flat against it, breathing hard. I didn't say anything. I've learned telling someone to calm down has never once made anyone calmer. I just stayed where I was, didn't crowd her, let her have the room. Took maybe 2 minutes. Her breathing evened out. She wiped her face fast with the back of her hand, like she didn't want me to see, even though I obviously had. I'm okay, she said, not looking at me. You don't owe me an explanation, I told her. She looked up at that. Something shifted in her face, small but real, like she'd been bracing for questions and gotten none. We finished eating. When I got up to clear the dishes, she got up too and started helping without asking, moving around my kitchen careful at first, then a little more sure of herself, like her hands needed something to do more than she needed to sit still. You don't have to do that, I said. I know, she said. I want to. Later I showed her the guest room down the hall. There was an old lock on the door, the kind that probably hadn't been used in years. Lock it if you want, I said. I won't be offended. She looked at the lock, then at me, and something in her shoulders eased just slightly. Thanks, she said. Quiet, but it landed like she meant it. I said goodnight and went to my own room. I lay there a long time listening to the storm, thinking about the woman down the hall whose last name I still didn't know, who kept checking the road like she was being followed, whose hands had shaken hard enough over dinner that she'd had to walk away from the table. I didn't know her story, but I already had a feeling it went a lot deeper than a dead car and bad weather. 3. The storm hadn't cleared by morning. If anything, it was worse. I woke up to rain still going hard on the roof and, weirdly, the smell of coffee already made weird because I'm usually the first one up. I walked into the kitchen and found Ren at the stove in my oversized sweatshirt, hair pulled back, looking like she'd been up for hours. Hope that's okay, she said, nodding at the pot. Couldn't really sleep. More than okay, I said. The tow company told her it'd be at least 2 more days before anyone could get out to her car with the roads the way they were. She didn't seem too bothered by that. If anything, she looked almost relieved to have a reason to stay a little longer. Over the next couple days, we settled into something neither of us planned out loud. I went to work, she stayed at the house, and by the time I got home there'd be small signs of her. The pantry rearranged in a way that actually made sense. Laundry folded on the couch, something half-started on the stove waiting for me to finish. Third evening, we were out on the back porch watching the rain finally slow down to a drizzle. She was quiet a while, then asked, "Why do you live alone in a house this big?" I hadn't been asked that directly in a long time. Her name was Mara, I said. We were together 3 years. She died in a car accident. Road wasn't that different from the one I found you on. Ren went still. I'm sorry, she said. And it didn't sound like the automatic kind of sorry people say. It's been a while, I said. Some nights it still feels recent. I hadn't said Mara's name out loud to anyone in over a year. Saying it to Ren felt strange, but not bad. She didn't try to fix it or fill the quiet after. She just let it sit there, which turned out to be exactly what I needed. A few nights after that, it was her turn. We were doing dishes side by side when she said, "Careful. I should probably tell you why I was out on that road." I kept drying the plate in my hand and didn't push. I was with someone a long time, she said. Good at first. Really good. Then it slowly turned into something else. He controlled things, money, who I talked to, where I went. Got to where I barely recognized my own life. She gripped the edge of the sink. I packed a bag while he was at work, she said. Didn't have a plan. Just drove until the car gave out. Which happened to be right where you found me. I didn't say anything for a second. Let it sit. You don't owe me an explanation, I said. Not now, not ever. She looked over, and there was something in her face I hadn't seen since she got in my car that first night. Not fear. Closer to relief. Nobody said that to me in a long time, she said. Something shifted between us that night, even though neither of us said it out loud. Not romantic yet, not exactly. Just trust, the kind that gets built one honest moment at a time instead of all at once. But a worry sat under it, one I couldn't shake. She'd run from someone with money and control, and people like that don't usually just let go. I didn't know yet how right that worry was, or how soon I'd find out exactly who I was dealing with. It was a Tuesday when the calls started. I remember because the morning had been so ordinary up to that point. Ren humming while she made breakfast, me getting ready for work, the kind of normal morning that almost fools you into thinking nothing's wrong. Her phone rang. A number she didn't know. She went still, staring at it like it might do something on its own. Let it ring twice more before she picked up, and the second she said hello, her whole body changed, shoulders up, voice dropping almost to nothing. She hung up under a minute later, gripping the phone so hard her knuckles went white. That was him, she said. Grant. I didn't need to ask who Grant was. He knows I'm in this county, she said, voice shaking. I don't know how, but he knows. Grant, she told me that day, was successful, well-connected, not used to people leaving him. He'd never had to chase anyone before because nobody had. Now that she had, he wasn't going to make it easy. Over the next 2 days, the calls kept coming. Different numbers each time, always his voice underneath. Some soft, telling her he missed her, that things could go back to normal. Some sharp, reminding her what she was giving up. Ren wanted to run again. I could see the same instinct building in her that had put her on that road in the storm. I should go, she said one night, already reaching for her bag. If he finds this address, he'll come here, and I don't want to drag you into it. You're not dragging me anywhere, I said. This isn't his town, and you're not doing this alone. 2 days later, he showed up at my door. Expensive coat, calm on the surface in a way that felt practiced rather than natural. He looked past me into the house like he already owned whatever was in it. I'm here for Ren, he said. She came up beside me before I could say anything. I stood next to her, not in front of her. This wasn't a fight I was going to finish for her. I'm not going anywhere with you, she said, steadier than I'd heard her since the night I found her. Nothing you say changes that. He tried a few different angles, what they'd built together, what a mistake she was making. She didn't flinch. If you contact me again, she said, I'm calling the police. I mean it. Something shifted in his face, like he'd expected tears or hesitation and gotten neither. He looked at her, then at me, and finally turned and walked back to his car without another word. The quiet after the door shut was enormous. Ren stood there breathing hard, and then something in her seemed to let go all at once. She turned to me, eyes wet. You didn't have to stay for that, she said. I wanted to, I said. She didn't say anything else right away. She just stepped in and rested her forehead against my shoulder, and I let her stand there as long as she needed. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment something between us stopped being careful. After Grant left, the house felt different. Lighter, somehow, like a weight had come off both of us at the same time. Ren stopped checking the driveway every few minutes. Stopped locking the guest room door at night. Small things, but I noticed every one, because each one meant she was starting to actually believe she was safe. One evening I was digging through a closet for an old toolbox when she came in to help and found a box she wasn't supposed to find. Old photos, most of them Mara and me, from years I'd mostly boxed up and tried not to think about too hard. I figured she'd feel awkward, maybe leave the room. Instead, she sat down on the floor next to the box. Tell me about her, she said. If you want to. So I did. The little things, how she laughed too loud at her own jokes, how she always burned the first pancake and never the rest. Ren just listened, didn't try to compete with the memory, didn't rush me past it, just made room next to it. After that, cooking together turned into something we did most evenings without ever really deciding to. She'd chop something while I handled the stove, and we'd talk about nothing important, which somehow ended up being the most important talking we did all day. One rainy evening, she was at the stove when she said, not looking up, "You don't have to let me stay anymore. Car's fixed. I could get my own place." Something tightened in my chest at that. Not because she was wrong, because I realized right then how much I didn't want her to go. "I know," I said. She looked up, waiting for more, like that was supposed to be the end of it. "I know you don't have to stay," I said again, slower. "But I don't want you to go. Not because you need somewhere safe. Not because of the storm or Grant or any of it. Because somewhere in the last few weeks this stopped being a house I live in by myself. It's a place I want to come home to, because you're in it." She didn't say anything for a second. Rain kept tapping the window behind her. I started to wonder if I'd said too much. Then she crossed the kitchen and put her hand over mine on the counter. I turned my hand over and held hers. Neither of us said anything else. Didn't need to. Over the weeks after that, things kept shifting easy and slow. Her jacket showed up on the hook by the door. A second mug landed in the drying rack next to mine, like it had always belonged there. The house stopped feeling maintained and started feeling lived in, the way it hadn't in years. And somewhere in there, I started thinking about a question I never thought I'd be ready to ask again. 6 months went by faster than I expected. Ren's name was on the mailbox now, right under mine. The guest room had turned into an office she actually used. Books everywhere. A plant she swore she had no idea how to keep alive but somehow had. The house didn't feel like something I was maintaining anymore. Felt like home. Our life had settled into something almost boring in the best way. Dinners most nights. Weekend trips to the hardware store that somehow took 3 hours. The occasional argument about whose turn it was to do dishes that never lasted more than 5 minutes. After everything, ordinary felt like the best thing either of us had ever had. One evening, close to the 1-year mark of the night I found her, I told her I wanted to take a drive. "Where to?" she asked, grabbing her jacket. "You'll see." We drove out past town, down the same roads, until we hit the stretch of highway where her car had broken down. The sky that night was clear. Not a cloud anywhere. Nothing like the storm that had started all of this. She laughed when I pulled onto the shoulder. "Why are we parked on the side of a random road?" "Because this is where it started," I said. "Wanted to come back here once and just take it in." I got out and walked around to her door. She stepped out, confused, a little amused, until she caught my face and realized this wasn't just a nostalgic detour. "You once asked if you could sleep at my place," I said. "Just for one night because you had nowhere else to go. I never wanted you to have to ask me that again. I wanted you there because you chose it, not because you had no other option." I got down on one knee, right there on the gravel shoulder, in the exact spot where I turned my car around that first night. "Ren," I said, "will you marry me?" She stood there a second, hand over her mouth, eyes filling up. Then she laughed, the kind that comes out when someone's crying and happy at the same time. "Yes," she said, before I even had the ring all the way out of my pocket. "Yes, of course." I slid the ring onto her finger, hands shaking almost as much as hers had been that first night in my kitchen. She pulled me up and wrapped her arms around me right there on the shoulder. Cars passing every few minutes. Neither of us caring who saw. We drove home under a clear sky, nothing like the storm that had brought us together. The house was waiting, lights warm in the windows, no longer quiet, no longer built for just one person. It took a broken-down car, a bad storm, and a stranger who almost drove right past her. But somewhere in the middle of all that, 2 people who'd both lost something found their way back to each other, and built something neither of us expected to have again. A home, a future, and a love that started with 5 words on the side of a rainy road. "Can I sleep at your place?"